supposed to. It is your host, Justin Bourne. I am joined by David Amber and Anthony Stewart. They have unwittingly given me the reins for a very exciting reason today. My dad has joined us to talk a little hockey and Lord knows what else. So, Dad, I know you always wanted to come see me play in the NHL someday, but this is gonna have to do. Sorry, it's the best I could do.
Hey, you know my priority. It doesn't matter what.
Well, thank you very much for coming on today. I thought a fun place to start would be to take it back to the start of your career and Darius Court. A lot of people, know at this point that I ended up marrying the daughter of Clark Gillies, and you and Clark were best friends. I thought that might be a fun place to start if you could tell people what it was like, being in the NHL, living beside your best friend, owning houses together, and kind of raising kids while a part of an NHL dynasty, what those years were like.
Well, certainly, I'll go back to your very first thing, Justin. My first year, I think you sent me an email or text this morning about the money I made, and embarrassing. My salary at the time was my first year was $40,000. If I stayed up, I signed a 2-way contract, and the next year I was sent down to Fort Worth and made $18,000. And then, of course, came back up the third year, and things changed. But, Clarky and I kind of followed each other around, and I was on top of my old house fixing the roof one day, and Clarky says, hey, Bourne, you got to come see these houses are going up. So within a day, he had bought one, and we bought the one the next door, and so it's kind of funny. He has 3 girls, and I got to see them grow up. And you and Jeffrey were born, and we all grew up together. It was like one big happy family. But a lot of good times there.
All right, we'll throw it to you, David.
Hi, Mr. Bourne. Thank
Hello,
you for joining
David.
the show. Yeah. Listen. First question I have is, what's it like to be on a national radio sports show interviewed by your son?
Well, what are the odds of that, right? So I think it's amazing. I think Justin's come a long ways, but it's really been exciting for me, and I love watching the TV show, and I'm glad you guys have been able to stay on the radio here over the last few months.
It's actually, David, one thing that people don't know is we've kind of hoodwinked him. He follows the Leafs now because he watches the show, so we've really done a number on his psyche over the months.
I love it.
You certainly have. Yeah.
Anthony, go ahead.
Well, I'll start off by saying that I was advocating for the Islanders this season a lot more than your son Justin, so I'll just leave it at that. But you're part of the dynasty with the Islanders. Which one of your Stanley Cups, do you cherish most?
Well, I think it's always the first one, Anthony. You go all those years, and you don't even know if you belong. You don't know if you belong in the NHL, and then you find out you do belong, and then you try and get better and better. And our team just improved over those years. Like, I started in '74, and every year until 1980, we had more points than the previous year. So I was very, very fortunate to be there at that time. But certainly the first one, because no one can take it back from you. They can't take it away. You've won one, and you can always say the rest of your life you won a Stanley Cup. So, on a personal basis, the fourth one was very important to me. I led the team in scoring in the playoffs that year, and just playing at Edmonton and the rivalry we had with them, that was very important to me too. But I mean, they were all great, but I would say the first one.
So, just a reminder here, we're here talking with Bob Bourne on Hockey Central. So, when you guys won the Cup, if I'm not mistaken, did you get the Cup, I think it was for a week at a time, did you not?
No, we didn't, Justin. We only got it for one lousy day. And
that was it then too, hey?
Yeah, that was it. And I'll never forget the day I got it. And then, of course, Clarky got it for one day, so it was like in our possession for a couple of days. But funny story about all that is that Cup was in our house for a lot longer than one time. We were flying back from Vancouver after we'd won our third Cup. And when we got home, the Cup was in such disarray. Like, the top, it spins off, and the bolts were flying out. And so Bill Torrey, I was a bit of a handyman, as you know. And Mr. Torrey asked me if I would take it home to my garage and fix it all up. So it was sitting in my garage for about 5 days. I just couldn't. I just couldn't believe I'd go out there in the morning and here's the Stanley Cup sitting there.
And didn't you actually buy hardware, like put physical new hardware in the Stanley Cup to fix it up?
I did for sure. There's there are 3 30-inch bolts that go in it, and there's they bolt into the top, and then they run down to the bottom, and then you put a nut on them down there, and then you put that felt cover on to cover up. No, I know they've redone the whole cup since then, but my bolts were in that cup for a few years. I do know that for a fact.
That's unbelievable. David, awesome. Go ahead.
Well, listen, a few times your name obviously has come up on this show, and one theme that maybe surprised me is, maybe Justin's embellishing, but we'll let you fill in the blanks here, about how tough you were. And I think you were a lefty and you'd surprise guys, and Justin quite often talks about how you were a sneaky, tough player. Is that a fair characterization?
Well, you know what, David, it's hard to talk about yourself in that sense, but I found out early in my career, like I was big, I was 6'4" and 212 pounds. So, I was targeted a little bit, more than probably a little guy, but I found out I had to, and not just for myself, but for, team-wise, like, we had, my best buddy's Clarkie, and he's tough as nails. And then you have a Bobby Nyson and a Gary Howitt, and in those days we had Jerry Hart and Dave Fortier, and I just found out that I had to stick my nose in there just to be, just to show them that I could. And I was a lefty. I surprised a few guys, but trust me, I got surprised as many times as I surprised guys. So,
well, just knowing where I can take that with you, Dad. I think you've talked about going down to the minors in your second season, and there no one was as willing to protect the star, the guy from the NHL, and I believe that's kind of where you started fighting, right?
That's a really good point, Joe. So I had a lot more penalty minutes down there, and and I talked long and hard with like Gary Howitt and Clarkie and Bobby Nystrom the year before, and I remember after practice, like I had to learn how to fight because I never fought before. So, but they would take me out after practice, and they would teach me how to fight, and these were almost real fights. Like Bobby Nystrom, if he ever hit you, he'd break up your face, but. They practiced me a lot. So, when I went to Fort Worth, they had a team down there in Tulsa that was kind of like the Flyers, Philadelphia Flyers, all the years that I played against them. And they were tough. And I had to stick up for myself. And that was a learning period for me.
We're talking to Bob Bourne. Anthony, go ahead.
You coached multiple years in the IHL. How was it coaching in Vegas, and was there a lot of distractions at the time? And you coached a young John Erskine and a young John Sim. Did you know that they were going to become NHLers one day as well?
Well, I figured Johnny Erskine was, Anthony. He was just tough as nails. But the thing is with John, he was as green as grass when he got to us. Like he didn't really know how to play the game, and that I'm not saying anything bad against his junior coach, but he just didn't know positioning or anything like that. But Johnny had all the tools where he could stay, and he was so tough. I figured he would stay. Johnny Sims was kind of another different kid. Could really skate, very determined, and his only determination was to make the NHL, and that's what he wanted to do. And John was a good player, but he also had to learn the game. He didn't know the defensive side at all. So, but I had a good time with both those guys and became very close with them. Coaching in Vegas, I don't know how the players were, but it made no difference to me because there's two cities down there. I mean, there's the Strip and all that, the highlights and stuff, or the lights, and when you get away from the Strip, it's just different. It's like a normal city. I mean, I've been in Phoenix a lot. It's no different in Phoenix other than the Strip. I really enjoyed it there. In fact, I loved it there because there were distractions, and there was a few down times for me where I'd go watch a show, or lots of company down there, you know. The house was always full, but I really, really enjoyed it.
So a lot of people, I guess don't really know what comes after a playing career for a lot of people. And you didn't go right into coaching immediately. I think right when you finished playing or shortly after, you got your stockbroker's license. You've had a real estate license at one time. You ran fantasy camps. You went back to coaching. And I think part of, what people don't really see is, you come from the prairies as a young guy, and then you're in the NHL, and it just kind of stops. Maybe you can just tell people about what life is like for a pro hockey player, that's had a life in the game, trying to start anew and find a new path.
Well, I think it's really difficult for a lot of guys. It was difficult for me. And, the number one thing is you have to find out what you want to be doing the rest of your life. I certainly thought of coaching when I quit playing. But I wanted to come back. I wanted to come back to Kelowna. You boys were both set up in schools here, and your mom loved it. And so I decided to come back, and I just got my stockbroker's license here and did that for about 3 years. And then I went into real estate. Well, the one thing I found out that I wasn't was a salesman. So I finally gave up on that stuff. And so when I got a chance to go coach, and I was all over it. Now, the hard part was, the teenage years that you guys were growing up in, and I wasn't around very much. And, I was only home in the summer, and you guys came down and visited me quite a bit. But that was the hard part. But I liked coaching. I really did. It just didn't work out. And, coaching in the eye, like Anthony said, I was there for. I just loved that league. We were smaller than the NHL, but the players got paid well, and there were a lot of good hockey players down there. And I really, really enjoyed Vegas, and I really enjoyed Salt Lake City.
David.
Bob, in the last maybe 20 years or so, you have these get-togethers with your former Islander teammates, the alumni. How much, if at all, have you guys talked about what it would have been like your dynasty to go up against that Oilers dynasty, both at their prime, and how that would have played out? Because to me, that would have been just sensational.
Yeah, number one, David, I don't get down to New York a lot anymore. I used to go at least once a year, sometimes twice, and we would get together. We didn't talk about that stuff a lot. We just knew we were a really good team. And, our 40th anniversary of winning the first cup was just a couple of weeks ago. And a bunch of the guys went. I couldn't at the time. But I think on an individual basis, you think of that more often than as a team basis. I certainly, I don't go back a lot. Once in a while I'll flip on something and watch part of a game or something. And, I always say the three best teams that ever played were Montreal Canadiens, ourselves, and Edmonton. And I know a lot of people will argue with that, but that's my feeling. And it just would be a heck of a series. It really would be. Like we beat Edmonton 4 straight there, and then they came back and beat us. But, it would be so much fun to have played them in their heyday and us too.
Anthony.
The Islanders have been switching jerseys over the years, so I wanted to get your thoughts on the year that they had the Captain Highliner as their logo. What were your thoughts on that, and would the players have vetoed that if that was their jersey selection when you played?
You know what? Some of the things the Islanders have done have embarrassed me so much. I don't even talk about it. Like that jersey to me is the all-time worst. Maybe except for the Vancouver Canucks, that stupid black and that V one. I'm not sure. Yeah, but no, I hated that jersey. There certainly would have been some discussion in our locker room if that came out when we were playing. I know that. We were so proud of that logo. And I really do like a couple of the jerseys they've come out with, but I'm still very proud of the jersey we wore and just the type it was and that logo.
Dad, I think of those Islander years and the stories you've told me, a lot of them come back to Al Arbour and the kind of coach he was. I think actually to a story Clark told us once about Al Arbour handing out, putting eggs in everyone's stall and saying something like, "Why don't you put these in your pants and play a game, and none of you will probably break them," or something like that. Tell us a little bit about Al Arbour, who I believe the last time you saw him called you S-head when I was there with you. So you guys seem like you're on good terms.
Well, he was like a second father to me, and if it wasn't for Al, I don't know if I would have played in the NHL. He was so patient with me, so patient, and yet we had a love-hate relationship. Like, you could go and play the best game of your life, and the next morning at practice, he'd be skating beside you and ask you, "Where were you last night?" He just knew. He was a psychiatrist. Like, he just knew how to stay on top of you, but. Lovely guy, and it has been a long time since I've seen him, and rest in peace, Al. But he was he just knew how to push everybody's buttons, and at the same time make you feel like the most important player in the world. And he did with me. He just made me feel so good. I'll tell you a real quick story. There was a stretch where Trotchy and Bossy, they weren't going real well, and I'm down playing with Butchie. And so Al came up to me. He says, "Bourne," he says, "I'm going to stick you up on Trotch's line." And I says, "Why are you doing that?" And he says, "Well, I want you to get them going." And I'm thinking, you want Bob Bourne to get Brian Trotchy and Mike Bossy going, So he just elevated the way you thought of yourself. And I went out and had 4 great games with Trotchy, and all of a sudden I'm back down on the 4th line. He's like, just a great guy.
Well, that's awesome. And just wanted to say, well, thank you to David Amber for allowing me the opportunity to host a segment of the show. But most importantly, Dad, thanks for coming on and joining us. And thanks for all your support over the years and everything nice that I'm supposed to say that I'll say off the air. But love you very much. So thanks for joining us today. We will be back. No problem, Dad. Go ahead. You have something to add?
No, no.